Hello everyone, and welcome back to Mr. DarXnights. I know many of you use these videos to relax or fall asleep, so before you drift off, leave a comment and let me know where you're listening from. And if you're enjoying these stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's get comfortable and begin. Story number 1. The Last Train to Nowhere. The clock struck midnight, yet the town of Greysmouth remained cloaked in a silence too perfect, like the stillness before a storm that never quite passed. Cold air clung to the deserted platforms of Greysmouth Station, swirling like whispered secrets in the dark. The station had been abandoned for nearly 3 decades. No arrivals, no departures. Just a crumbling shell of memories and iron rails leading into blackness. But tonight, the lights were on, and the train had returned. Ethan Crowley stood alone beneath the flickering lamplight, his gloved hands deep in his coat pockets, his breath misting in the air. He didn't know why he had come. Something had pulled him here, something stronger than logic, louder than fear. A letter, unsigned and yellowing, had arrived at his apartment 2 nights ago. It contained only 6 words, scribbled in what looked like cold dust and ink. "The last train comes for you." He'd nearly laughed it off, tossing it aside with the junk mail. But that night, as he dozed off, he dreamt of the train, a long, shrieking beast of rusted steel and smoke, barreling through the night with no destination, only hunger. He woke drenched in sweat, the sound of the whistle echoing in his ears, even though he lived miles from any active tracks. Something in the letter felt true, and now here he was. A slow vibration rumbled beneath his feet, distant at first, then stronger. The earth beneath the tracks seemed to groan. A wind stirred, howling low like a breath drawn through teeth. Then headlights, pale, sickly beams of yellow pierced the dark as the train emerged from the shadows like a ghost dragging its own chains. It screeched to a stop. The doors opened with a hiss, exhaling cold mist into the station. Ethan stared. There was no conductor, no announcement. Just silence and an empty carriage lit by dim, flickering lights. He hesitated for a moment, common sense screaming at him to run, but his legs moved forward, pulled as if by unseen hands. He stepped aboard. The doors snapped shut behind him. The train jolted forward. Inside, the air was heavy and damp, like a basement that hadn't been opened in years. The seats were old, velvet torn and stitched, stained with patches of something dark. The windows showed only blackness. No trees, no moonlight, no towns. Just the void. He took a seat near the center, trying not to meet the eyes of the passenger across from him. A man sat there, motionless, dressed in an old-fashioned suit, tie askew, his hat resting on his knees. His face was pale, so pale it looked powdered, almost theatrical. And his eyes, they were open, too open, staring right at Ethan. Not blinking. Ethan swallowed hard. "Excuse me, do you know where this train is going?" The man didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even breathe. The lights flickered. When they came back, the seat across from Ethan was empty. His pulse quickened. He rose from his seat, looking down the aisle. The other cars were empty, or so they seemed. As he walked, every step echoed loud against the metal floor. He opened the door to the next car. Inside, things were different. The walls were lined with portraits, dozens, maybe hundreds, old black and white photographs framed in dark wood. Every face stared forward, solemn and cold. Ethan leaned in, inspecting them. There was something strange about their eyes, a familiar sadness. He took a step closer and realized with a sick chill crawling up his spine. One of them was him. The picture showed him sitting at a desk, the same coat, the same face. But his eyes were empty. Suddenly the train screamed, a sound like a banshee's wail. It wasn't the brakes. It wasn't mechanical. It was alive. The lights went out completely. In the dark, something brushed past him, cold and whispering. He backed away, fumbling for the door behind him, and stumbled into the next car. This one was colder. The windows here were gone. Instead, there were mirrors lining both sides of the train. Ethan turned to look, But his reflection didn't mimic him. It moved on its own. It was grinning. He froze. The reflection reached out, tapping the glass from the inside. Ethan backed away slowly, heart thudding against his ribs. The thing in the mirror pressed its face closer, mouthing something he couldn't hear. The train jolted again. He was thrown back into the wall, the mirror cracking behind him. A whisper slithered into his ear, but when he turned, no one was there. And then the scream came again, louder, closer. He raced through the carriages now, each one worse than the last. In one, there were rows of people dressed in funeral clothes, their heads down, hands clasped as if in prayer. But none of them were breathing. One woman had her mouth sewn shut with black thread. In another, there were children staring at flickering televisions that showed static. When Ethan entered, they all turned their heads in perfect unison, their eyes bleeding shadows. They pointed at him. He ran. Somewhere between the next two cars, the train passed through something, some curtain of cold that bit into his skin like knives. And suddenly, he was in a car that looked exactly like his old apartment. The couch, the bookshelves, the cracked lamp in the corner. But it was wrong. Everything was too still. His photo on the shelf showed not a smile, but a scream. He walked to the door. It was the front door of his old place. He reached for the handle. Knock! Knock! He turned around. There was a figure in the kitchen, slowly emerging from the shadows. Tall, thin, its face smeared with ash and ink. It didn't have eyes, only hollow sockets dripping black tears. It raised one hand and pointed at him. "You boarded?" It whispered, voice like rust and sorrow. "You chose to ride. I didn't choose anything. You answered the letter." Ethan backed away. "Let me off this train." "There is no off," it said. "Only through." The train bucked again violently. Ethan hit the floor hard, head spinning. When he looked up, the apartment was gone. He was in a new car now. Rows of empty seats, but they were filled with sounds. Echoes of laughter, crying, screaming. Not around him, inside him. They felt like memories, but they weren't his. He sat up slowly. The windows on this car were different. They showed scenes. A child drowning, a man hanging from a tree, a hallway stretching forever with a door at the end, covered in red handprints. He stood again, drawn to the door at the far end of the carriage. It opened before he could reach for it. Beyond it was a single room, dimly lit, wooden, a single chair in the center. In that chair sat a version of himself. Older, tired, eyes hollow. The man looked up. "It ends where it began," he said. "I don't understand." "You will." The room began to fade. The chair dissolved into dust. And then Ethan was alone again. The train was slowing. Somewhere in the distance, a whistle blew. Not the trains, but something else. Something waiting. As the wheels screeched, and the darkness outside began to part like curtains revealing a nightmare stage, Ethan realized something. The train was arriving, but he didn't know where, and something was waiting on the platform, smiling. The train hissed as it came to a stop, the sound long and sharp like a serpent exhaling its final breath. Ethan stood frozen by the door, staring out into a place that couldn't possibly exist. There was no platform, no town, just fog, thick, pale fog, stretching endlessly into the black beyond. And yet the door opened. A wave of cold air surged inside, colder than anything he'd ever felt. Not just in temperature, it was the kind of cold that scraped the soul, that made you feel forgotten, erased. Ethan hesitated, gripping the metal handle of the train's frame. Something was calling to him again. Not a voice, not a sound, just an invisible tug, like gravity reversed, pulling him forward. He stepped out. The ground beneath him was soft, but not grass, not dirt. It was like walking on memory. Each step stirred something deep inside him, half-remembered things, faces, pain. The fog swirled around his legs and rose to his chest, and then higher still. The train behind him disappeared from view within seconds, swallowed whole. He walked forward, not because he wanted to, but because he couldn't turn back. The train wouldn't be there if he tried. He knew it. He felt it. That part of his journey was done. Then the sound of footsteps. Not his. They were soft, padded. Just behind him. He turned quickly. Nothing. Only the fog. But the footsteps started again. Louder now. Rushed. Running. Ethan broke into a sprint. The fog thickened. It twisted around him like arms trying to hold him still. The air tasted of rust and old coins, and he choked on every breath. He didn't know what he was running from, only that if it caught him, it would remember his name in a way that made it disappear forever. He saw a shape up ahead, a lamppost, flickering, like the one back at Greysmouth Station. A second later, another lamppost appeared, and then a third. They formed a narrow path through the fog, leading toward a small, crooked building that looked like a ticket booth fused with a mausoleum. As he approached, the window slid open. Inside sat a man with paper-thin skin, his fingers impossibly long and yellowed at the tips. His eyes were too small, too many, layered in rows like insect eyes. His voice, when he spoke, was smooth as oil and twice as toxic. "Name?" he asked. Ethan hesitated. "What is this place?" "Name," the man repeated, a smile twitching across his face like a glitch. "Ethan Crowley." The creature leaned forward. A wet, slithering sound echoed from under the desk. Papers shifted. Files rustled. "No," the man whispered. "Not anymore." "What?" The man licked his lips. "Names do not survive the crossing. That's the price." "I didn't agree to any price." "You boarded the train," the man hissed. "You accepted the letter. You answered the call." The man stamped a ticket with a sound like breaking bones and handed it to Ethan through the slot. The ticket was blank, just a strip of torn paper. When Ethan blinked, it was gone. The booth vanished with it. Ethan was alone again. The path of lights behind him had disappeared. In front of him, there was now a narrow tunnel carved into the ground, curving downward like a throat. Stone walls, slick with condensation, breathed faintly with warmth, an unsettling contrast to the chill outside. He stepped in. The further he walked, the louder the whispers became. Not around him, inside him. Words that weren't his in voices he didn't recognize. "Let go. Turn around. Don't let it find you." He pressed on. The tunnel narrowed until he had to crawl, scraping his knees on rough stone. The air grew warmer, heavier. With each breath, it felt like he was swallowing someone else's breath. Then light. He emerged into a chamber, circular, silent. A well sat in the middle, ancient and covered in strange runes that pulsed faintly. All around the chamber were doors, dozens of them, each different in shape, size, color. Some wooden, some iron. One was made entirely of bone. One bled from the keyhole. Ethan approached the well. He looked inside. There was no water, just an impossible depth. And then a face, his own, staring up from the darkness, lips moving. Ethan leaned closer. "Don't open any doors," the reflection mouthed. Too late. A door behind him creaked open. Ethan turned slowly. It was a simple white door, the kind you'd find in any suburban house. A small golden doorknob. Familiar. He stepped toward it. As he passed the well, his reflection grabbed him. Not with hands, with feeling. His body stiffened, vision darkened. A flood of images poured into his mind, memories that weren't his. A boy screaming inside a burning house. A woman whispering lullabies with worms falling from her mouth. A man staring at himself in a mirror, carving his name into his own chest to remember who he was. Ethan fell to his knees. The chamber spun. The white door swung wider. Music drifted through, soft, sad piano, and a voice humming along out of tune. He crawled toward it. He didn't want to. He had to. Inside was a hallway, familiar, his childhood home. The wallpaper, the cracked photo frames, the smell of old wood and mold. He stood up slowly, brushing off the dust. A single light bulb flickered above. The humming grew louder. He followed it into the living room. There, in the armchair near the fireplace, sat his father. But his father had died 15 years ago. Ethan froze. The man looked up. Same face, same eyes. "Ethan," he said, his voice hollow. "You've come back." "This isn't real," Ethan whispered. "Of course it is. You never left." Ethan backed away. The room stretched with him, walls elongating, ceiling rising. His father's face shifted, twisting, melting. His eyes turned black. "You boarded the train," the thing in the chair growled. "You never get off." The floor cracked beneath Ethan's feet. He fell through the boards, through memory, through time. He landed hard on cold tile. A hospital. Empty. Lights buzzed above. The hallway was long, impossibly long. Wheelchairs stood abandoned. For stands rusted. Doors slightly ajar. A whisper echoed through the halls. Asterisk, room 413. Asterisk. He didn't want to look. But he walked. Each room he passed was a scene. People he'd never met but somehow knew. A man sitting in a chair while his teeth fell out one by one. A boy writing the same word over and over on the wall in blood. Remember, he reached 413. The door opened before he touched it. Inside was a hospital bed. A monitor beeped steadily. Ethan approached. In the bed, himself. Older. Frilier. Tubes in his nose. A band around his wrist. Crowley, Ethan Doty, unknown. He stared. The man in the bed opened his eyes. "You died years ago," he whispered. Ethan stumbled back. "No, I'm still alive." The room began to shake. "You boarded the last train." The voice echoed from every corner. "You are the echo now. The memory. The shadow." The hospital dissolved. He was back on the train. Same seat. Same flickering light. Across from him sat himself. But wrong. This version grinned wide, too wide. His eyes were black. His skin was peeling at the edges, revealing gears and ash. "Chapter 2, it said, voice distorted. "You're almost through." "Through what?" Ethan asked, his throat raw. "The forgetting." The lights went out. When they came back, the train was full. Passengers lined the seats. Each one had no face, just masks, porcelain, cracked, all different. One turned to Ethan and spoke with a voice he recognized. It was his mother's voice. "You should have never answered the letter." Another spoke, this one his old friend. "You always wanted to know where dreams went to die." And another, his own voice. "Welcome home." The train shook violently. Sparks flew from the ceiling. The windows shattered, but there was nothing outside. Only a black ocean of stars swirling and screaming. The faceless passengers rose from their seats. They began to chant, not in words, in memory, moments from Ethan's life, spilling out in voices not his own. His first heartbreak, the time he almost drowned, the night he stood at the edge of a building and thought, "What if I just let go?" He screamed. They kept chanting. Then the whistle. The train lurched, slowed, stopped. The door opened, not to a platform, to a mirror, a full-length mirror floating in space. Ethan stood, walked to it. Inside the mirror was a version of him that was whole. Peace, eyes closed, breathing steady. He reached out. The reflection opened its eyes and screamed. The glass shattered. 1,000 Ethan Crowleys fell into the void, each one holding a different regret. The train began to pull away again, moving into darker places. The lights dimmed. The faceless passengers sat again, silent. Ethan sat with them, his hands trembling. Outside there was nothing, and somewhere deep in the engine of the train, something began to breathe. Something old, something that knew him, something that was waiting. The train moved slower now, not in speed but in time. Ethan could feel every second drag like a body across gravel. The ticking of the overhead clock had stopped hours ago, or maybe days, but the feeling of motion continued, not just forward but inward, as if the train were burrowing through layers of him, peeling away years, skin, memory. car by car, moment by moment. He hadn't spoken in what felt like forever. None of the other passengers had either. They sat motionless, faceless, masked and rigid, like wax statues dressed for a funeral no one was attending. Only the train breathed, a low, constant hum beneath his feet, like a creature slumbering in the metal belly of it all. Ethan wanted to leave. He stood, and as soon as he did, the masks turned. All of them, one by one, as though pulled by invisible strings. Their porcelain faces tilted in perfect unison, cracking faintly as if their gaze alone fractured the air around him. He moved to the aisle. No one stopped him. He walked, past the old man with the fox mask, the child with the eyeless rabbit head, the figure wrapped in funeral veils that whispered secrets in a language he didn't understand. He kept walking. Each car grew stranger. In one, gravity was reversed. Chairs bolted to the ceiling, passengers floating just inches above their seats like marionettes. In another, the windows were filled with moving images of moments from Ethan's life, but wrong, twisted. His mother smiling as she walked into a fire. Himself as a child, holding the hand of something that wore his father's face but had too many teeth. And in one car, completely empty, stood a single payphone. It rang as he entered. He picked it up. A voice he hadn't heard in 10 years answered. "Jamie? Ethan? You there?" He gripped the phone tightly. His knuckles turned white. "Jamie?" he whispered. "You were supposed to come back," the voice said. I tried. Where are you? You left me in the water." "No," Ethan gasped, heart racing. "That wasn't me. I didn't mean to." "You let go." The voice turned sharp, cold. "You let go." The payphone melted in his hands. Metal ran like wax, dripping through his fingers. He stared as it turned to ash, and then was gone. The walls of the train car groaned. The lights flickered. The floor beneath him trembled. Something was waking. Ethan stumbled forward, hands pressed against the walls for balance. As he reached the end of the car, he stopped. The next door was different. It wasn't a normal train door. It was made of wood, carved intricately with symbols that hurt his eyes to look at. Faces, mouths open mid-scream, eyes overlapping in spirals, trees growing from skulls. At the center, a clock, its hands spinning backward. He opened it and stepped inside. Darkness, complete. The door slammed behind him. No light, no sound, no floor beneath his feet. He floated, no hung in the void. Then a whisper, faint, behind him. He turned, but there was nothing. Then again closer. Another whisper came from inside his ear, from inside his skull. 1,000 voices, layered, all of them him, repeating things he thought he had forgotten. "I wish I had jumped. I shouldn't have said that. I knew he was drowning, but I froze." Ethan screamed. The darkness peeled away. He landed on something soft, carpeted. He stood slowly. He was in a hallway. No train, no masks, just home. His childhood home, the one that had burned down 20 years ago. The air smelled like cinnamon and old books. There were photos on the walls. He looked at them closely. Each one was a memory, frozen, but all the faces were wrong. His parents' eyes were black voids. His own smile bled from the corners. In one, his brother, Jamie, stood behind him holding a knife. Ethan turned away. The hallway stretched longer. At the far end, a door waited. His old bedroom. He walked. The floor groaned beneath his feet. The walls whispered. He opened the door. Inside, the room was untouched. Toys on the shelf. Posters on the wall. The nightlight still shaped like a rocket, casting a faint blue glow. But on the bed, someone lay sleeping. He stepped closer. It was him, as a child, peaceful, unaware. Ethan's throat tightened. He reached out. The boy's eyes snapped open. Pure black. The child sat up slowly and stared at him. "You're not supposed to be here," it said in his voice. "I don't know how to leave. You missed your stop. I never saw one." The boy tilted his head. Because you were too busy looking backward. The nightlight dimmed, the walls faded, the bed sank into the floor, and the boy with it. Ethan was alone in a white room. A train horn echoed low and long. The door reappeared. He walked through it, back on the train. Only now it wasn't moving. The windows showed a station, or what once had been a station. Ruins, crumbled stone, iron rails twisted like roots. A sign barely hanging by a chain read, "End of the line." Ethan stepped off. No one else moved. He stood in ash. The air was still. And then, from behind the wreckage, came a sound. A slow dragging, heavy steps. Ethan turned. A figure was coming. Tall, slender, wearing a conductor's hat made of stitched skin. Its face was a blur of everything he had feared as a child. It stopped inches from him. "Ethan Crowley," it said, voice echoing with 1,000 others. "Yes, you have reached your destination. What is this place?" The conductor turned, raised an arm, pointed to a grave, freshly dug. The headstone read, "Here lies Ethan Crowley, the man who wouldn't wake up." Ethan's breath caught. "No, I'm not dead." The conductor stepped aside, offered a shovel. "You choose," it said. "Go back to sleep or keep digging." Ethan stared. Behind the grave, the train had changed. It was now a rusted beast of metal and bone. Smoke rose from its windows. The tracks behind it faded into shadow. In the grave, something moved. A hand, his own, reaching up, waiting. Ethan turned to the conductor. "What happens if I get back on? You forget. And if I dig? You remember." "Remember what?" "Why you boarded in the first place." The fog rolled in. The grave whispered. The shovel felt warm in his hands. He chose to dig. And as he did, the earth wept. The conductor watched in silence. The other passengers stood along the platform now, their masks cracked and crumbling, their faces revealed, not monstrous but hollow, lost, people who had once chosen sleep over memory. As Ethan dug, the whispers grew louder. He saw flashes, a bridge, water, a scream, Jamie, his brother slipping, his own hands frozen. Then, letting go, Ethan fell to his knees. "I didn't mean to," but the grave kept whispering. "You did. You watched. You left." And now he remembered. The letter, the one he never meant to open, the one that called him back. The last train wasn't death. It was guilt, wrapped in smoke and silence. A ride through all the moments you tried to forget. Ethan dropped the shovel. He climbed into the grave. The earth closed over him like a sigh. The conductor stepped forward, stamped the ground once, and walked back to the train. The engine screamed. The train vanished. All was still. And in the grave, Ethan opened his eyes. Alone, but awake. At last. There was no light, no warmth, only the pressure of dirt, its weight heavy on Ethan's chest as he lay in the grave. But he was breathing. Somehow, each inhale felt thick, like drawing in smoke or ash. But it was breath nonetheless. Life even here, in the cold cradle of regret. He opened his eyes to pitch black. And yet he saw, not with sight but with memory. It bled from the soil, from the cracks in the coffin of this moment. Visions. Jamie in the water, Ethan's frozen hands. The silence that followed, longer than any scream should last. Then the splash, but not from Jamie, from Ethan. He had jumped, he had tried, but the river had already taken him, swept him down, left Ethan grasping at nothing. The guilt had lied. It had wrapped around his grief like vines around a tomb, twisting what little truth remained, feeding on the parts he couldn't face. Ethan had tried to save his brother, but trying wasn't enough, and so he boarded the train, to forget, to wander, to disappear into movement. Now, beneath the earth, he remembered not just the pain, but the truth. He reached up through the soil, fingers clawing toward the surface. The dirt gave way like breath, and he rose, not from a grave but from a bed. Sheets soaked in sweat, room unfamiliar, walls breathing. He wasn't back home. He was somewhere else. Somewhere between. A station not marked on any map. A place where the last passengers woke, or didn't. The room was bare. A single chair, a flickering light, a cracked mirror. He stepped toward the mirror and stared, not at his reflection, but at Jamie's, younger, smiling, alive. The image warped. Jamie was drowning. Ethan reached toward the glass. His hand passed through. Water spilled out, and suddenly he was submerged. Cold wrapped around him like chains. He was underwater, alone. No sound, no sky, just endless blue-green silence and the distant echo of that train horn, impossibly deep, vibrating through the sea like a lost memory. He kicked, clawed toward the surface. Shapes moved above, dark, distorted outlines peering into the water. Passengers, masked, watching, waiting. He surfaced with a gasp, lungs burning. But the world he entered wasn't the same one he had left. The sky above him was rust-colored. The stars dripped like wax, and the train waited by the shore. Not sleek, not polished, but old, rotting, its metal rusted to bone, its windows leaking shadow. The door opened without a sound, and Ethan stepped back inside. No one else moved. The car was empty. Only the conductor sat waiting. His face had changed again. Now it looked like Ethan, but older, hollow-eyed, dead behind the gaze. "Back again?" it asked, voice dry as parchment. "I remember now. You think that changes anything?" Ethan stepped closer. "It changes everything." The conductor stood, removed its cap, placed it on Ethan's head. "You're driving now." "I don't want to." "You already are." The train trembled. The whistle blew, long and low. Ethan looked out the window. The tracks ahead were endless, but not straight. They curled, looped, spiraled through impossible landscapes. Forests made of teeth. Cities that blinked like eyes. Oceans of whispering mouths. Each stop was a story, a soul, a place of pain. The train moved forward, and Ethan didn't resist. Not anymore. He walked the length of the train. Each car was empty, yet full. Echoes clung to the walls. Moments caught in flickers. A man clutching a bloody suitcase. A child sobbing beside an open window. An old woman laughing in a room of shadows. All of them passengers once. All of them left something behind, or carried too much to face the world again. Ethan reached the final car. A single door waited. He opened it, and found himself on the platform again. But not the broken ruins from before. This station was clean, bright. Sunlight bled through the cracks of an old iron roof. And on a bench sat Jamie, whole, alive, smiling. Ethan stepped forward, breath catching. "Jamie?" The boy looked up. "You came." Tears blurred Ethan's eyes. "I tried. I thought you were gone. You never left me." "Not really. I couldn't save you." Jamie stood, took his hand. "You saved the part of me that mattered." A whistle in the distance. The train began to vanish. Ethan turned to look. His frame faded like smoke. The conductor nodded once from the window before the train dissolved into nothing. Jamie led Ethan away from the tracks, through a gate, into light, but just before it faded, Ethan looked back once more. A new train stood where the old one had been, fresh, untouched. The door opened. A man in a torn coat stepped aboard, eyes haunted, soul heavy, and Ethan understood. The last train to nowhere never stopped running. It only changed conductors. And so, as Jamie faded into memory, and the platform dissolved into sleep, Ethan remained, not to forget, but to help others remember. The dream changed, became quieter, more peaceful, for now. But someday another soul would find the ticket in their pocket, hear the midnight whistle, and board the last train. And when they did, Ethan would be waiting, not as a passenger, not anymore, but as the voice that guides, the hand that reaches back, the light at the end of the corridor. Because not every nightmare ends when you wake up. Some follow you home. But even in the darkest dream, someone has to lead the way out. And Ethan had finally found his track. He was no longer lost. The train rolled on, through shadow, through silence, through sorrow, carrying one more soul toward the morning, toward memory, toward peace. Story number 2, The Ghost in the Mirror. It started with a dare like most teenage horror stories do. Not the kind of dare that makes you laugh after a soda explodes or when someone runs down a hallway in their underwear. This one came with hushed voices, flashlight-lit whispers, and the kind of silence afterward that felt like holding your breath for too long. The house was old Holloway Street, 2 blocks from the high school, abandoned for at least 15 years. Rumors swirled about the family that once lived there, a mother and 2 daughters who vanished in the early 90s without a single trace. The father was found weeks later in the attic, swinging from the rafters with fingernails clawed off and eyes gouged out. Of course, no one could prove that part, but in the world of teenagers and urban legends, facts didn't matter, fear did. Lena had always been the bravest of them. Not loud brave, just that quiet kind of confidence that made the others listen when she spoke. So when she agreed to the Bloody Mary dare without hesitation, the rest of the group went from cocky to nervous in seconds. She smirked and tossed her dark braid over one shoulder like it was no big deal. The rules were simple. Lights off, candle lit, door closed, say the name 3 times. Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. The bathroom upstairs was chosen for its cracked mirror and dust-caked corners. A rusted clawfoot tub sat beneath a window stained with years of grime. Someone had placed an old candle on the sink. Wax already dripped and hardened into gnarled shapes. The group stood in the hallway as Lena stepped in, shutting the door with a quiet click. They waited. She lit the candle. The flame flickered, swaying left, then right, though there was no breeze. Her reflection stared back at her from the tarnished mirror, warped at the edges, making her face look like it was being pulled toward something unseen. She cleared her throat. Bloody Mary. Pause. Nothing. Bloody Mary. Another pause. The candle fluttered, its light dimming for a second. Bloody Mary. The silence afterward felt unnatural. No creaks, no wind, not even the distant groan of old pipes. Just the whisper of her own breath, which had grown oddly shallow. The mirror began to fog over, as if someone had just exhaled against the glass, except she hadn't moved. Her breath had caught in her throat the moment the flame bent unnaturally to the side, like something had passed by it. The fog grew thicker, her reflection blurred, and then movement. Behind her, she turned quickly, nothing. The candle wavered again, casting long shadows across the faded wallpaper. The mirror, still cloudy, now showed the shape of 2 handprints, pressed from the inside. The prints dragged downward, slowly, smearing the condensation in long, trembling trails. A shiver crawled down her spine. She reached out and wiped at the glass. Nothing there, just her own wide eyes staring back. But her reflection seemed slower. It blinked a heartbeat too late, tilted its head a little too far to the side. Lena backed away. The reflection didn't move. Then it smiled. Not the way Lena smiled. The lips curled up in a stiff, broken way, revealing teeth that weren't hers. Too sharp, too many. She didn't scream. She couldn't. The air was thick now, humming against her ears like static. Then the reflection whispered something, lips barely moving. Your turn to stay. The candle extinguished with a hiss. Pitch black swallowed the room. Outside the door, her friends heard a thud, then silence. They called her name. No response. When they pushed open the door, the room was empty. The candle sat on the edge of the sink, untouched. The mirror was clean. No handprints, no fog, not even the smudge of where she'd wiped it. Just the reflection of the room and the 3 friends standing there, confused and pale. Lena was nowhere to be found. They searched the house, every room, every closet, even the crawl space in the basement. Nothing. The police got involved. Her parents were frantic. But eventually, after a week of no leads, no signs, the search fizzled out. The story became another piece of the town's ghostly folklore. The girl who disappeared during a Bloody Mary dare. Another myth wrapped around a tragic truth. But then, strange things started happening to the others who were there that night. It began with Jonah, the quiet kid with dark circles under his eyes. He stopped sleeping. When asked, he claimed he kept hearing scratching, coming from inside the mirror. At school, his friends noticed his reflection didn't match his movements perfectly anymore. It lagged behind just slightly, enough to make your stomach twist when you looked at it too long. One morning, he didn't show up to class. His parents found the bathroom door locked from the inside. They had to break it down. The mirror was shattered. From the inside, no sign of Jonah, just shards of glass and a single perfect handprint, pressed into the back wall, smeared with something red and sticky. Next was Ava. She had sworn never to talk about that night again, tried to pretend Lena had just run away. But mirrors started cracking around her house. First in the hallway, then her bedroom, then the rearview mirror of her car shattered while she was driving, sending her skidding into a ditch. She was fine physically, but she stopped talking altogether afterward. Then came the whispering. Her mother swore she heard a voice coming from Ava's bathroom in the middle of the night. Soft, slow, repeating something over and over. Your turn to stay. By the time Ava's father went in to check, the bathroom mirror had fogged up completely. When he wiped it clean, Ava was gone. The only thing left was her cell phone, recording screen flickering, audio distorted by static and low, wet breathing. The last frame before the video cut out showed a second Ava, standing in the mirror smiling. Only Mason remained. He tried to run, transferred schools, stayed in motels, covered every reflective surface with blankets, towels, whatever he could find. He even started sleeping in rooms without mirrors, brushing his teeth using his phone camera instead. But it didn't stop. Reflections found their way back. Polished door handles, television screens, water puddles. They'd flicker, then freeze. Show someone something standing behind him, something that looked like Lena but moved wrong. And every time he blinked, she got closer. One night, he filmed it, set up a camera while he slept, convinced he was going crazy. When he watched the footage the next day, the blood drained from his face. At 3:13 a.m., the mirror above the dresser began to fog on its own. Pale handprint appeared, then another. Then Lena stepped through. Her movements were jerky like old film skipping frames. She didn't look dead, exactly, just wrong. Her eyes were too wide. Her mouth didn't move when she whispered. She stood at the foot of the bed, watching Mason for 7 full minutes. Then she leaned down, placed a hand on his chest, and whispered one word, "Stay." Mason vanished that night. All that was left was his phone, with the video still playing on loop. And now the house on Holloway Street stands silent again. Except sometimes, when the moon is low and the wind isn't blowing, neighbors swear they hear soft laughter, and the distant creak of a bathroom door opening slowly on its own. Inside, if you dare to look through the cracked window, you might see the bathroom mirror. And in it, not your reflection, but hers. Smiling, waiting. Because the rules were never about saying her name 3 times. They were about who she could replace. And now, she's looking for the next one. It had been nearly 2 weeks since Mason disappeared. The town didn't talk about it much anymore. People had learned to look the other way, to mutter condolences and quickly change the subject. Tragedy had a way of numbing communities, especially when it came wrapped in stories that didn't quite make sense. But not everyone could forget. There was one who still remembered, who couldn't sleep, who avoided mirrors the way others avoided dark alleys or broken sidewalks. Her name was Claire. She hadn't been part of the original group that night in the Holloway house, but she was Lena's best friend before everything happened. They had been inseparable once. Sleepovers, secret codes, promises whispered beneath blankets lit by flashlight. The night Lena vanished, Claire wasn't invited. Not because of any falling out, Just one of those things where someone says, "We'll hang out later," and then they never do. That silence had weighed on Claire since the day Lena's mother called, voice cracking, asking if she'd seen her. Claire hadn't slept through a full night since. The strange thing was, Lena hadn't left her completely, at least not in the way people assumed. It started subtly. The mirror in Claire's room would fog randomly, even when the heat was off. At first, she blamed her breath or maybe a draft. Then she saw it just once when she leaned too close to the glass. A handprint, but not hers. It was smaller, fingers longer than normal, and smudged from the inside. She had told herself it was stress, grief, maybe even guilt. She'd scrubbed the glass clean, avoided eye contact with her own reflection, and buried herself in schoolwork. But the feeling didn't go away, that crawling sensation under her skin when she walked past any reflective surface. And then the voice started. It was never loud, never harsh, just a whisper, sometimes from the bathroom, sometimes from her vanity mirror. Always the same two words, "Your turn." It didn't matter how fast she turned around. Nothing was ever there. Claire started sleeping with the lights on. She covered the mirror with an old bedsheet. It didn't help. The whispering grew louder. She unplugged her television, left her phone face down. But still, she would catch glimpses of Lena's face, warped and stretched across reflections. Mouth unmoving, but always whispering. She knew the stories, the rumors. People claimed Lena had become something else, that she was trapped, or worse, had been replaced. But Claire hadn't believed any of it. Not really. Until the night the bathroom door slammed shut on its own. It was a cold Tuesday in March. Claire had just finished brushing her teeth when the door, wide open moments before, slammed so violently it shook the walls. The lights flickered. The air turned heavy. Her breath hitched as she turned to the mirror. The glass had already fogged over, though no steam filled the room. It wasn't fog from heat. It was breath. Cold, moist breath. But not hers. She stared at the foggy surface, heart hammering. Then she saw it. A message, slowly appearing as if written by an invisible fingertip. "Stay with me." She backed away, trembling. The reflection didn't match her steps. It remained in place, staring forward with eyes that had turned completely black. Claire screamed. Her back hit the door. She grabbed for the handle. It was locked. She hadn't locked it. The reflection began to smile, slowly, horribly, each inch revealing something more monstrous than human. And then it moved without her. It reached forward. The real Claire stumbled, grabbing a nearby perfume bottle and hurling it at the glass. The mirror shattered. Instant silence. Shards of broken glass lay scattered across the floor. Her reflection was gone, and so was the message. When she finally unlocked the door, somehow it had become jammed from the inside. She ran straight to her parents' room, but they wouldn't understand. They couldn't. They blamed nightmares, stress, said it was grief manifesting as hallucinations. They covered the mirrors in the house just to appease her, but they didn't believe. That same night, she got a message on her phone. No contact name, just an unknown number. "Do you want to see her again?" Claire's hands shook as she typed a response. "Who is this?" No reply. Then an image appeared. It was dark, grainy, but unmistakable. Lena. She stood in what looked like a bathroom. Tile walls, cracked sink, a mirror behind her. But something was wrong with her face. It was blurred at the edges, like it was being pulled from inside out. Her eyes were too wide. Her mouth stitched closed. Claire dropped the phone. The screen went black. From that night forward, she began researching everything she could about Bloody Mary. Not the party game version, but the real stories, the rituals, the folklore, the ones hidden on dark web forums, scattered across old witchcraft books, spoken about in hushed tones on late-night podcasts that warned listeners not to take it seriously. But Claire took it seriously. She learned the name wasn't always Mary. In some cultures, she was known as the Mirror Witch. In others, she was a spirit tied to betrayal and envy. Trapped in reflective surfaces, only able to cross over when summoned by someone who believed. The ritual was never about the name itself. It was about intent. Belief gave her form. Fear gave her strength. But what truly opened the door was grief. Claire's grief. She realized it too late. The more she researched, the more she remembered Lena, the more she longed for answers. The thinner the veil became between the two worlds. And the witch noticed. Claire began to see things even in broad daylight. Her reflection watching her when she looked away. The shadows behind her moving just slightly slower. Every glass surface became a threat. One evening, after another sleepless night, she looked into the mirror across from her bed, and for the first time her reflection spoke out loud, but its lips never moved. Instead, the words echoed inside her skull like a scream underwater. "You opened the door." Claire staggered backward, hands clamped over her ears. The reflection stayed still, and then it began to bleed from the eyes, from the nose, from the mouth. Black, thick, and slow. She ran. Her parents didn't stop her. They were too used to her breakdowns. She left the house that night with only a flashlight and her journal filled with fragmented notes about the ritual, legends, and theories on how to reverse it. But she had no idea where to go, until the text came again. This time, it wasn't a question. "Come to Holloway Street. She's waiting." Claire hadn't gone near that house since the night Lena vanished. But something compelled her now. Not just fear, not just curiosity. It was something deeper, like a string pulling her from the inside. She didn't even remember walking most of the way. It was like her body moved ahead of her thoughts. The house stood the same as ever. Rotting wood, boarded windows, a sagging porch. She stepped inside. The air smelled of mold, decay, and old secrets. Her footsteps echoed louder than they should have. The door creaked shut behind her, unprompted. She didn't flinch. Instead, she climbed the staircase. Each step groaned like it remembered her, like it was welcoming her home. At the top, the hallway stretched endlessly, darker than it should have been, lined with mirrors she didn't remember being there before. Each one showed a version of her, older, younger, twisted, crying, bleeding, smiling too wide. And at the end of the hall, the bathroom door, closed. The candle inside flickered faintly, as if waiting. Claire approached, heart hammering, breath shallow. She reached for the knob, turned easily. The door opened with a whisper. The bathroom looked untouched since that night. The same cracked mirror, the same rusted sink, the same clawfoot tub, and in the reflection, Lena, not the stitched mouth version, not the blurred demon she had become, but Lena, her friend, crying. Claire stepped closer, eyes wide. "Lena," she whispered. Lena didn't respond. She only raised one hand and placed it against the inside of the mirror. Claire mirrored the motion. Their hands met, glass separating them. Then Lena mouthed a word. "Help." Claire's chest tightened. "I don't know how," she said aloud. "Tell me, please." The mirror cracked, just a hairline fracture, running diagonally across the glass. Lena's mouth opened, but instead of words, blood spilled out. And then, behind Lena, something moved. A figure, tall, thin, draped in a black veil, eyes glowing faintly beneath the fabric. It stepped closer, arms reaching around Lena like a lover, claws pressed against her shoulders. Lena turned her head, eyes pleading. The reflection whispered one last time. "Trade places." Claire didn't understand. But then the mirror rippled, like water disturbed by a stone, and her hand passed through. The cold on the other side was indescribable. Not just cold, empty, silent, eternal. Lena reached for her, tears still flowing. Claire felt herself leaning forward, heart pounding. A voice, from nowhere, whispered, "Your turn to stay." Claire's fingers trembled as they hovered above the cracked mirror. The air around her seemed to pulse, thick with tension. She had felt the cold, yes, but there was something worse than that. something far more terrifying. It wasn't just the frigid chill that shot through her veins, but a sensation deep within her chest, as if something inside her was pulling, tugging, drawing her in closer. Lena's reflection, her distorted, tear-streaked face, was still locked in place, her hand pressing against the glass. And just behind her, that figure, the one in the black veil. It loomed, impossibly tall, like a shadow bleeding into the light. The figure's arms reached further, stretching unnaturally as it curled its fingers around Lena's form. Claire couldn't breathe. Every instinct screamed at her to pull away, to run, to get as far from that mirror as possible, but her feet were frozen to the floor. Something about the scene, the pull of Lena's eyes, made her heart ache with a rawness she couldn't explain. It was like she was seeing a friend begging for help, her final cry for salvation, and yet every move she made, every step closer she took, seemed to only worsen the situation. The reflection, Lena's image, began to distort. The smooth, tear-streaked face twisted into something grotesque, something unfamiliar. The eyes that once pleaded with Claire now darkened, becoming hollow and empty. The mouth that had whispered her name moments before now opened, impossibly wide, stretching inhumanly. The glass of the mirror cracked deeper. A sharp, snapping sound echoed in Claire's ears. "No," she whispered under her breath. Her fingers hovered above the cracked surface, but her mind screamed to turn away. The figure, the veiled one, stepped forward, inching closer to the edges of the mirror, as though it was no longer bound by the glass, as though it was beginning to cross over. The whisper came again. The voice, distant but unmistakable, rose from the depths of the mirror, sliding into Claire's mind. "Help me!" Claire flinched, her heart thundering in her chest. It wasn't Lena's voice now. The words were deeper, darker, coming from somewhere else, something else. She couldn't tell. She couldn't focus on anything but the crushing pressure in her chest, the way the air felt like it was being drawn out of her lungs. Her reflection in the mirror didn't match her movements anymore. It was lagging, shifting as though it had a life of its own. It mimicked her actions, but it wasn't her. She could feel it, the shift, the wrongness. The reflection of Claire in the mirror was beginning to look like someone else. It wasn't just a reflection. It was a thing. Her heart skipped a beat. The reflection grinned. No, it wasn't possible. She was losing control of the situation. And yet, she couldn't tear her gaze away. The whispers grew louder. Her reflection opened its mouth again, but the words weren't clear. They weren't even words, just a series of jagged syllables, as if someone were trying to speak through thick glass, distorted and unnatural. In that moment, the air shifted again, sharp and stifling. Claire felt a hand close around her wrist. Her real hand, not the reflections. Her breath caught in her throat. The hand didn't belong to her. Claire whipped around. There was no one there. The room was empty. The bathroom door was shut tight. Her pulse quickened, a rush of panic surging through her veins as she looked back at the mirror. Her reflection wasn't mimicking her movements anymore. It was doing its own thing. It moved differently, slithering in a way that no human could. It grinned wider, lips stretching to an unnatural length. The eyes, those eyes, burned with an intensity that sent an icy chill crawling up her spine. Claire reached for the door, desperate to escape, but the handle wouldn't turn. She twisted it again, harder this time, but it was stuck, as if the door had melded into the frame. She could feel something pressing on her from behind, that oppressive weight of being watched. Slowly, ever so slowly, her reflection in the mirror began to raise a hand toward her, just as it had when she had first come close. Her throat tightened. The glass seemed to ripple. The voice spoke again, this time louder, more insistent. "Stay." And then, something terrifying happened. The reflection stepped out of the glass. At first, it was only a shadow, long, stretching fingers that slid over the mirror's surface, pushing through the crack in the glass. The image wavered, warped, then something more tangible began to emerge. The figure, with its pitch-black veil, slipped slowly through the mirror's frame, arms unfolding in an unnatural way. It was like the reflection itself was no longer bound to the glass, like the mirror had become a portal. Claire stumbled back, her breath ragged, heart racing faster than she could count. The room grew colder. The air thickened with the overwhelming stench of rot. The walls seemed to close in on her, the edges of the room becoming more distorted, less real. The sound of her own heartbeat drummed in her ears, deafening. Her mind screamed at her to leave, to run, to get away from that mirror. But as her eyes locked on the reflection, her legs betrayed her. She couldn't move. It stepped closer, the figure in the veil. "No, please," Claire whispered, her voice trembling. She could feel her pulse roaring in her throat, every instinct telling her to flee, but her body felt like stone. The figure was standing just behind her reflection now, staring at her with eyes that gleamed from beneath the veil. It reached out a long, thin finger, grazing her reflection's cheek. The glass of the mirror cracked again, this time spreading in jagged lines across its surface, as if the glass itself could no longer contain the force of what was inside. "Stay," the voice repeated. Only this time it was more than a whisper. It was a command, a decree. Claire took a step back, terror gripping her every nerve, but she couldn't tear her gaze away. The reflection smiled, a cruel, malicious grin that seemed to grow wider, stretching to an impossible width. It wasn't Lena anymore. It was something else entirely. Then, with a sudden movement, the figure in the veil reached forward. The mirror shattered. The entire surface exploded into 1,000 shards, each piece catching the dim light of the flickering candle on the bathroom counter. Claire cried out, covering her face as sharp edges whizzed past her. Her hand touched the door handle again, pulling desperately. The door clicked open just as she heard it, the unmistakable sound of glass hitting the floor. And then nothing. Silence. Her heart hammered in her chest, the ringing in her ears almost deafening. She stumbled out of the bathroom, not daring to look back at the remnants of the shattered mirror. She slammed the door shut, leaning against it as her body trembled uncontrollably. But that wasn't the end. It wasn't the end of the nightmare. She turned to look at the wall behind her, where, scrawled in a dark, smeared mess, were words she could never forget. "Your turn to stay." Claire's mind spun, everything around her spinning out of control. The whispers weren't just in the mirror anymore. They were in her mind, pressing against her thoughts, suffocating her. And that was when she realized something far worse. She wasn't alone. The mirror, broken and destroyed, still held power. And whatever had been trapped inside was now free. The night was suffocating, thick with tension. The shadows in Claire's room stretched unnaturally, twisting into grotesque shapes that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. The air felt colder now, colder than before, even though the windows were sealed tight. The chilling atmosphere crept into her bones, settling deep into her chest. It wasn't the kind of cold that could be chased away by a blanket. No, this cold was inside her now, gnawing at her very soul. She sat in her bed, staring at the walls, eyes darting nervously. The whispers were gone, for now, but the fear remained, a constant weight pressing down on her. What had happened? What was the meaning of those words scrawled on the wall? "Your turn to stay." It was like something was marking her, claiming her as its own. Something dark, something ancient had awoken, and it was no longer confined to the mirror. But she couldn't tell anyone. How could she? No one would believe her. Not about the mirror, the shattered glass, or the horrible thing that had been unleashed. They'd just think she was going mad. And maybe she was. Maybe all of it had been a hallucination. But she couldn't shake the feeling, the unshakable certainty, that whatever she had seen wasn't just in her head. It was real. The events of the past few hours played over and over in her mind, each one more terrifying than the last. Lena had been so confident, so eager to challenge the mirror, and now she was gone, vanished, disappeared without a trace, like she'd never existed. The police had questioned Claire, of course. They'd questioned all of them, but no one could explain what had happened. Lena's house was eerily empty. Not a single sign of her had been found. The mirror in the bathroom had been shattered, just like the one in Claire's room, but the police had dismissed it, claiming it was just an accident. But Claire knew better. She knew it wasn't an accident. Her mind kept flashing to the moment when the mirror had shattered. That moment when the reflection had stepped out, when the figure had reached for her, when the walls had cracked. The figure in the veil had smiled at her, a wicked grin, and then everything had exploded into chaos. She hadn't seen Lena after that. She hadn't heard from her either. Claire's stomach twisted. She couldn't stop thinking about Lena's eyes, the way they had looked at her in that final moment. Empty, distant, as if she had been taken. It was as if she were no longer in control of her body, her actions. Like something had stepped in, something dark and hungry. A loud crash from the kitchen snapped Claire out of her thoughts. Her heart lurched in her chest, and she froze, listening. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a scraping sound, like nails against wood, made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She stood up slowly, her feet heavy with dread. What was that? She moved toward the door, creeping down the hall. The house was dark, eerily still, but the noises continued. A low scraping, like something dragging itself across the floor. Claire's mind raced as she reached the kitchen doorway. Her eyes fell on the counter, where a single shard of glass sat, glinting in the dim light from the living room. It was from the mirror, she could tell. Her breath caught in her throat. The sound was closer now, coming from the living room. A faint tapping, rhythmic and steady, as if something was waiting. Something or someone. Slowly, Claire crept toward the living room, each step making the floorboards creak beneath her. Her pulse hammered in her ears. The door to the living room was ajar, and from within, Claire could see nothing but darkness. But she could hear something, a faint, soft whispering. Her heart sank. It was a voice, low, guttural, unfamiliar. Claire! It was her name. That voice, it was coming from the mirror. Her stomach turned. No, it couldn't be. She had thrown the mirror away. She had broken it into pieces. Couldn't be alive. Couldn't be calling her name. But there was no denying it now. She stepped into the room, and there, standing against the far wall, was the mirror. It wasn't the same as before. It was whole again. The cracks, the shattering, all of it had healed, as if the mirror had never been broken. And there, in its reflection, was Lena. Her friend's face stared back at her from the other side. But something was wrong. Her eyes were wide with terror, her mouth frozen in a silent scream. Behind her stood the figure, the one from the veil, its presence towering over Lena. Lena's eyes flicked over to Claire in the reflection, and in that brief moment, the silent scream turned into words. "Claire, help me." The words felt like they were being ripped from her throat, torn apart by something cruel, something malevolent. Lena's body jerked as though something unseen had taken hold of her. Her reflection screamed, but Claire couldn't hear the sound. She could only watch as Lena's body jerked again, twisting, moving in unnatural ways. But the worst part was yet to come. The figure in the veil reached out, a long skeletal hand stretching toward Lena's body, and then it turned, slowly, deliberately, until it locked eyes with Claire. The smile from earlier returned, but this time it wasn't just a grin. It was a hunger, a need, a terrifying, consuming desire. And then, the voice spoke, that same voice Claire had heard in the mirror. The voice that had haunted her every thought, every dream, every waking moment since she first spoke the words. "Your turn to stay." Before Claire could react, before she could run, the glass shattered once more. Not from the inside out, but from the outside in. The shards exploded across the room in a violent wave, flying straight at her. She stumbled back, throwing her arms up instinctively to shield herself, but it was too late. The glass cut through her skin, and as it did, she felt something far worse than physical pain. something that dug deep into her soul, pulling at her very essence. Her vision blurred, the world around her twisted and shifted, and then, like the final breath of a dying wind, she was falling into darkness, into the endless void beyond the mirror. Her body slammed onto the cold floor, but Claire wasn't alone. She could hear them now, the whispers, the soft, chilling whispers. They weren't from the mirror anymore. They were inside her mind. And in the darkness, she heard one final, clear message. Welcome to the other side. The end of second story. And the third story is The Ghost in the Mirror, based on Bloody Mary rituals gone wrong. They shouldn't have gone through with it. The challenge had been simple, almost cliché. Something ripped straight from the pages of childhood dares and urban legend nonsense. But under the hum of flickering fluorescent lights, with rain tapping rhythmically against the windows, the old tale had felt just dangerous enough to be thrilling. It was Lena who suggested it. Lena, with her half-smile and curious tilt of the head, always chasing the next unsettling thrill. She'd heard about it online, some obscure subreddit filled with users claiming the Bloody Mary ritual was more than just a story, that it wasn't just an echo from bored middle schoolers, that if done correctly, something came through, something that didn't want to go back. There were 5 of them that night: Lena, Claire, Ryan, Josh, and Natalie. Friends since middle school, now older, but still tethered by boredom and that secret craving for the macabre. The power had gone out just after sundown, knocking out the Wi-Fi with it. The neighborhood was wrapped in darkness and drizzle, and with their phones barely holding charge, someone had suggested a game. By candlelight, with nervous grins and adrenaline rising, they made their way into Claire's upstairs bathroom. It was the only one with no window, perfect for darkness. The air smelled faintly of lavender and mildew. The mirror above the sink stretched wall to wall, speckled from years of use. Beneath it, cold porcelain. Nothing unusual, nothing dangerous. They lit 3 candles and placed them on the counter, then turned off the flashlight. Total blackness. Breathing became louder, the kind of silence where every shuffle, every creak was amplified. They all knew the steps. Look into the mirror, say her name 3 times, wait. Most people laughed. Most people got bored after a few seconds and flipped the lights back on. Lena insisted it had to be done alone. They argued, of course, but she had that look in her eye, the one that made backing down impossible. She wanted to prove it, or maybe she didn't believe in it at all and just wanted the thrill. Either way, they agreed. One by one, they'd take turns. Lena went first. She stepped into the bathroom, shut the door behind her, and twisted the lock. On the other side, the others sat in the hallway, candles glowing in their laps, casting dancing shadows along the walls. They waited. The seconds ticked by slowly. From inside the bathroom came a faint murmur. Lena's voice, whispering something low, probably the name. Then silence. Then nothing. No scream, no laughter. Just the low hiss of candle wicks and the occasional drip from a leaky pipe somewhere within the walls. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Claire leaned closer to the door, tapping it gently with her knuckle. "Lena?" she whispered. No response. A chill crept down her spine. She glanced at Ryan, who gave a small shrug, lips pressed tightly. Natalie looked like she wanted to say something but didn't. Josh stood, muttering something under his breath, and tried the knob. Locked. He banged on the door. "Lena, come on. It's not funny." Still silence. Claire's unease grew heavy. Then the knob clicked. The door creaked open slowly. Inside, Lena stood at the sink, her back to them, staring into the mirror. The candles were out. Only the moon, filtered through the hallway, lit her shape. Claire stepped inside slowly. Lena didn't move, not even a twitch, just stood there breathing shallowly. Then Claire saw it. The mirror, it was fogged, but there was no steam, no running water. The air was still cold. Her eyes flicked to the surface again. There were handprints, small, pale ones, on the inside of the mirror pressed outward, the kind of imprint glass remembers for just a moment. Only these hadn't faded. Claire's heart dropped. "Guys!" she whispered, backing away. Lena turned. Her face was pale, eyes unfocused, like she'd been sleepwalking through some terrible dream. A faint smile touched her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. She stepped past them wordlessly and walked down the hallway, leaving the bathroom door wide open behind her. No one followed. They just stared at the mirror and those handprints, still there, still pressed against the glass. That night, Claire didn't sleep. Neither did the others. They didn't speak about it either. Not really. Ryan said maybe Lena was messing with them. Josh tried to laugh it off. Natalie went home early, but none of them looked each other in the eyes when they said goodbye. Claire lay in bed, the shadows outside her window moving with the wind. Her bedroom mirror was covered with a throw blanket, something she'd done long ago for no particular reason, and tonight she was grateful for it. But she kept thinking of Lena, and the look in her eyes. The next morning, Lena wasn't at school, nor the day after. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her social media accounts were still up, no new posts. By day 3, Natalie was pacing. "We should check on her," she said. The others agreed. Claire's hands trembled as she rang the doorbell at Lena's house. No answer. They went around the back and found the door unlocked. Inside, the house felt hollow, not just empty but wrong, like the air itself had been emptied out and filled with something that didn't belong. The living room was untouched, dishes still in the sink, Lena's phone on the coffee table. But no Lena. It was the bathroom where they found it. The mirror, smashed, not shattered like someone had thrown something at it. Shattered from the inside. The cracks webbed outward from the center, as though something behind the glass had burst free. Shards littered the sink, the floor, and the walls. A smear of red blood ran down the white tile beneath the mirror. Claire's throat closed up. In the reflection of the jagged glass, a face flickered. Not hers, not Lena's, something else. Pale, expressionless, watching. They left the house in silence. No one spoke of what they saw. Not until weeks later, when Claire began to notice something strange. Her mirror, in her room. Every morning, the surface was fogged, even when the room was cold. Even when no one had used the bathroom for hours. The fog lingered long after it should have disappeared. And worse, there were handprints now. Always faint, always pressed from the inside. And then, one night, as she brushed her hair before bed, her reflection didn't match her movements. It hesitated, a half-second delay like a video buffer. Her heart froze. She blinked, looked again. Her reflection blinked too, but too late. And when it smiled first. She dropped the brush and backed away slowly, eyes locked with her own image. Her legs trembled. The smile in the mirror faded into a whisper, and though no sound escaped, the words echoed in her head. "Your turn to stay." She flung the blanket back over the mirror, heart hammering in her chest. The whisper still echoed, as if the mirror wasn't just glass anymore, as if it had become something else. Claire didn't sleep that night either, and in the dark, something moved behind the blanket. Claire stopped looking in mirrors after that night. Every time she passed one, she turned her head away. In bathrooms, she kept the lights low, eyes down. It wasn't just superstition anymore, it was survival. Something had changed since Lena's turn. Something had come back with her, and now it was crawling, slowly, toward Claire. The morning after the whisper, the one that didn't come from her lips but echoed in her head, Claire awoke with a pressure in her chest, like she hadn't been breathing properly all night. Her mouth was dry, her tongue heavy. The blanket she'd thrown over the mirror had fallen off during the night. She didn't remember hearing it fall. She stared at the bare glass across the room. Nothing unusual. No cracks, no fog, no handprints. It looked just like a mirror again. But that was part of the trick, wasn't it? She dressed quickly, avoiding her reflection, and didn't touch the light switch. Her hand hesitated near the edge of the door, her eyes scanning the frame, as though something might reach through it. Only when the sun outside hit her face did she allow herself to breathe again. At school, everything looked normal on the surface, but the silence was thick. The group that had been bound by curiosity was now bound by fear. They didn't speak about Lena. They didn't mention mirrors. Even in the halls with locker doors and hallway glass, their eyes stayed down. But it was Ryan who broke first. 3 days after Lena vanished, he came to Claire during lunch, eyes sunken, voice hushed. "Have you seen her?" he asked. Claire didn't need to ask who he meant. He nodded once. "I did." She leaned in. "When?" "Last night. In my bathroom." Claire felt her stomach twist. "She was in the mirror. I went in to brush my teeth. I wasn't even thinking about it. Just routine. I looked up and she was standing behind me." Claire's lips parted, but no sound came out. Ryan's voice dropped lower. "Only, she wasn't really behind me. I turned around, and the room was empty. But in the mirror, she was there, standing, staring." Claire swallowed hard. She looked dead, Claire, like wet, hair-soaked, skin gray, like she'd been drowned. She didn't blink, didn't move. Claire shivered. "And then what?" She smiled, then walked into the mirror and disappeared. Ryan hadn't gone home after that. He stayed at a friend's place and covered every reflective surface. But he still felt it, like eyes behind glass, watching, waiting. Claire didn't ask how long he'd seen her. She didn't want to know if it lasted seconds or minutes. She only wanted it to stop. But deep down, she knew it wouldn't. Josh was next. He didn't show up for school. Natalie tried calling, but he didn't answer. When Claire went by his house, his mother looked confused, her voice tight. "He's in his room," she said. "But he hasn't come out all day, not even for food." Claire climbed the stairs slowly, her stomach churning. At the top, the air felt colder. The hallway was dark. Josh's door was closed. She knocked. No answer. "Josh!" Still nothing. She twisted the knob and eased the door open. He was sitting on the floor, legs crossed, facing his closet mirror. Eyes wide, pale. His lips moved, whispering something Claire couldn't hear. His reflection did not match his movements. The reflection stared directly at her, even though Josh's back was to the door. Claire stepped back. Josh's whispering stopped. Slowly, his head turned toward her, but his eyes were vacant, like he hadn't slept in days. "I can't stop looking," he whispered. She said, "I have to watch." Claire took a breath. "Josh, come on. Let's go." "You don't have to." She said, "I'll see myself disappear. That's when I'll know." Claire backed out of the room, her pulse thudding in her ears. She left the house without saying goodbye. That night, she covered every mirror in her house, taped bed sheets over the bathroom mirror, duct taped the one in the hallway. Her reflection had started feeling like a stranger. Something was different in the eyes, something duller, more calculating. When Claire finally lay down to sleep, she left her lamp on. But sleep didn't come. Sometime after midnight, she heard the knock. Soft, gentle, from inside the room. Her eyes flew open. She sat up, heart pounding. The mirror was covered, she'd made sure of it. Another knock. 3 slow taps. She didn't move, just listened. The blanket over the mirror rustled. Claire gasped and jumped out of bed. She backed into the corner, heart in her throat. The blanket was shifting, something behind it pushing forward. Then silence. She crept toward it, every muscle trembling. Reached out, snatched the blanket away. Nothing. The mirror stared back at her, whole, untouched. Her own reflection, pale and wide-eyed, mimicked her. Claire nearly laughed from relief until the reflection blinked. Out of sync. Once again, it smiled. A whisper tickled her ear. "You're almost ready." She screamed and threw the blanket back over the glass, ran out of her room, and slept in the living room with every light on. In the following days, Natalie became the only one Claire trusted to talk to. Ryan had stopped answering calls. Josh's parents said he was in therapy. Claire didn't know what that meant, only that it was too late. Natalie listened. She always listened, but her fear was growing too. "We should go back," she said one night. "To Lena's." Claire shook her head. "No, that's where it started. But maybe there's a way to end it." Claire paused. She hadn't let herself hope for an end. That Friday night, they met outside Lena's house again. The rain had returned, soft and constant. The windows were still dark. No signs of life. The door was locked now, but Claire knew where the spare key was. Inside, everything was the same. Dusty, quiet. Lena's bedroom was cold. The sheets pulled back as if she'd left mid-sleep. Her closet door creaked open just slightly. The mirror inside was still shattered, each shard reflecting warped angles of the girls' faces. Natalie stepped toward it. "Maybe if we break all the mirrors." Claire hesitated. "Or maybe that just lets it out." The thought lingered in the air. Something moved behind them. They both froze. A soft whisper, like breath against the ear. Then the closet door slammed shut. Claire shrieked and turned, grabbing Natalie's arm. "We need to go." They bolted out of the house without looking back. Back at Natalie's, they sat in silence for hours. Claire spoke first. "What if she's not dead?" Natalie looked at her. "Then where is she?" Claire looked down at her shaking hands. "In the mirror." And somehow, she knew she was right. Later that night, Claire dreamt of standing in front of a mirror that stretched for miles. Behind the glass, Lena stood barefoot, dressed in white, her skin translucent, her mouth opened, and from within, dozens of pale hands reached out, grabbing the inside of the glass, pounding, clawing. Claire tried to run, but the reflection didn't move. It stood there, rooted in place, and she watched herself get pulled away. She woke screaming. The next morning, Natalie was gone. Not missing, just changed. At school, she wouldn't meet Claire's eyes, wouldn't speak, and her reflection in the window, Claire noticed, smiled when she didn't. Something had gotten through. Claire walked home in a fog. Her head ached. Her breath felt short. Her mirrors were all covered, but it didn't matter anymore. She could feel them. Even with her eyes closed, she saw them. Fingers pressed against glass, eyes staring, whispered threats behind every reflective surface. That night, she decided to end it. She went into the bathroom with a flashlight and shut the door. She stared at the mirror, then uncovered it. Her own face looked back at her, pale, hollow. She took a breath and whispered, "Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary." The mirror fogged. No breath. A whisper echoed. Finally, Claire didn't flinch when the mirror fogged over. She stood there, flashlight flickering slightly, watching the mist swirl across the glass like breath from something unseen. Something just inches away. But the room was still. No wind, no sound. The silence felt too thick, like the house was holding its breath with her. She stared into the haze, waiting for the shape, for the face, for whatever would come next. A pale outline started forming shoulders, hair clinging wet to a gaunt face, eyes like deep wells of blackness. The figure behind the fog wasn't just Lena. It wasn't just Bloody Mary. It was something older, something using their faces, wearing them. Claire knew she should run, but her legs didn't move. Her arms stayed limp at her sides. Her body felt like it didn't belong to her anymore. The figure raised a hand, pressed it to the glass from the other side. Long fingers splayed wide. Another hand followed, then another, then another. Dozens of hands, crowding behind the reflection like people pressed against a window in a burning building. All silent, all watching her, all waiting. Claire's own reflection faded entirely. It was gone, and in its place a door began to form. The glass rippled, like water disturbed in slow motion. The bathroom around her dimmed. The light bulb above fizzled and died with a small pop, leaving her with only the flickering beam of the flashlight. But the door, it opened. A slow creaking sound echoed from the mirror as the reflection parted like a curtain. And beyond it, a hallway. Not hers. Stone walls. Wet, glistening. Candlelight flickering with no flame in sight. The air that poured out smelled like damp wood, mildew, and something coppery, like blood soaked into old fabric. Claire was shaking, but she stepped forward. And the moment her foot crossed the threshold, gravity seemed to shift. The air thickened like syrup. Her flashlight dimmed, then died. Everything behind her vanished, and when she looked back, the mirror was gone. No door, no bathroom, just the sound of dripping water somewhere ahead. She was inside the mirror now. The hallway stretched on, an impossible geometry that twisted slightly with each step. The walls breathed. She could hear the slow, rhythmic pulse, like something asleep in the stone. The candlelight flickered higher as she passed, casting strange shadows that moved the wrong way. She turned a corner. Lena stood at the end of the hallway, or at least what was left of her. She wore the same clothes as the night of the ritual, but her skin was almost translucent, and her eyes were wide, glassy, like a doll's. Her mouth opened, but the words didn't come from her mouth. They echoed from the walls. Claire, it's not a game anymore. Claire took a step back. Lena walked forward. You said it 3 times. You opened the door. Claire felt cold breath on the back of her neck. She spun. No one was there. When she turned back, Lena was closer, and her mouth wasn't moving anymore. The voice came again, but not from Lena this time. From Claire's left, then her right, then all around her. She's watching, always watching. She doesn't want you to leave. Claire stumbled backward, then turned and ran. The hallway twisted. Doors appeared, each with mirrors. Some cracked, some fogged, and behind each one, people, trapped, banging, screaming. Some were familiar. Josh, Ryan, Natalie, their hands pressed to the glass. Their mouths moved, but no sound came. Claire stopped in front of Natalie's. Her eyes were wide, tears streaking down her cheeks. She mouthed something. Claire leaned closer. It looked like run. The lights flickered again. A loud crack echoed behind her. She turned. A tall figure stood at the end of the hallway now. Not Lena, not Bloody Mary. Something in between. A woman in tattered white, skin soaked and bloated, hair hanging over her face, eyes glowing red, and she crawled toward Claire, slowly, with joints bending the wrong way. Claire screamed and ran down the corridor, ducking into a room and slamming the heavy stone door behind her. She turned the latch, backed away. The room was circular. Candles circled the edge, and in the center, another mirror. But this one was shaped like a window, floating midair, spinning slowly. Inside it, her bedroom. She saw herself sleeping. No, not sleeping. Lying still, too still, eyes open. The reflection smiled at her. Claire's knees buckled. She crawled toward it, reaching out. "Let me out," she whispered. The figure in the reflection mirrored her exactly, but slower, deliberate, mocking, placed a finger to its lips. H. Then everything went dark. A moment later, a blinding white light exploded across the room. Claire shielded her eyes. Voices screamed from the walls, dozens of them. "We see you. You're ours now. You said it 3 times. The room began to spin. The floating mirror cracked. Claire backed away, heart pounding. And then the figure stepped out of the wall. Not Bloody Mary, not Lena, a woman made entirely of reflections. Her body shimmered with fragments of mirrors, moving like armor. Her face was a mosaic of shifting glass, eyes appearing in places they shouldn't, mouths whispering in all directions. "You looked too long," she said. Her voice sounded like Claire's, and Lena's, and Natalie's, all together. "You were warned." Claire shook her head. "I didn't mean to, but you did." The mirror woman stepped forward. Claire threw a candle at her, but it passed right through. The room went silent again, and then she felt the hands grab her ankles. From the floor, pale hands, dozens of them, reached through the stone, pulling, clawing. She kicked and screamed, but they were too strong. They pulled her to the ground, dragged her toward the floating mirror, now spinning violently. Her fingers scraped the floor, trying to find something to hold onto. The woman crouched down beside her. "You'll make a fine replacement." Claire screamed one last time before she was pulled into the spinning glass. And then silence, darkness, nothingness. Claire blinked. She was standing in her bathroom again. The lights were off. The mirror was whole. She reached for the door. It opened. Her room was there. Normal. Safe. Was it a dream? She stepped out slowly, walked down the hall. Her parents sat at the kitchen table, reading. Everything was okay, until her mother looked up and didn't smile. Her eyes widened. "Claire," she whispered. Claire furrowed her brow. "What?" Her father stood, slowly. "Claire's already at school." Claire backed up, heart thudding. "No, I'm here." But when she looked down, she wasn't casting a shadow. She turned toward the hallway mirror. There was no reflection, just black glass. And behind the glass, her reflection watched, smiled, and whispered, "Your turn to stay." It had been 3 days since Claire disappeared. Her parents filed a missing persons report. Flyers with her photo flooded every lamppost and school bulletin board in town. Her friends swore she was at the sleepover one night and then gone the next morning. The house showed no signs of forced entry. Her bedroom window was locked from the inside. And worst of all, the mirror in her bathroom had shattered. But not from the outside, from within. The shards were scattered neatly on the tiled floor, edges sharp as razors, yet no blood was found. The police were baffled. There was no explanation, no evidence, just the cracked glass and the eerie feeling no one could shake, that something in the room was still watching. Natalie hadn't slept since that night. She stared at her own reflection for too long now, checking for lags, flickers, delayed blinks. She'd seen Claire, or something pretending to be Claire, in the hallway mirror just the night before. Only for a second, but the smile was wrong. Too wide, too knowing. Natalie told herself it was the lack of sleep, the guilt, the stress. But deep down, she knew Claire hadn't left. She was stuck, and something else had come back in her place. Natalie sat on her bed now, trembling, holding the old compact mirror Claire had left behind at the sleepover. A small, round thing with a flower on the back. It was the only item retrieved from the scene, untouched. No fingerprints, no smudges. The police returned it without a second thought. But Natalie knew better. She opened the compact slowly. Fog bloomed across the glass. No breath, no heat, just mist. And then a whisper, so faint she nearly missed it. "Natalie!" Her heart froze. She slammed the compact shut and tossed it on her desk. No more games. She stood up and went to her bathroom, flicked on the light, and stared into the large wall mirror. Her own face stared back, hollow-eyed, lips trembling. Her fingers hovered near the light switch. Just say it once. See what happens. That's how it always starts. But she didn't. Instead, she ran the sink, splashed cold water on her face, gripped the edge of the counter. Her knuckles turned white. Then came the knock. Tap, tap, tap. She turned. The mirror behind her didn't move, but the sound didn't come from the door. It came from inside the mirror. Her reflection was no longer copying her. Tilted its head the opposite direction. Natalie stood still. Her reflection blinked after she did, and then it whispered, "Your turn." Natalie backed away slowly. The mirror rippled, and then something slammed against it from inside, cracking the center with a spiderweb fracture. She screamed and bolted out of the room, but every mirror in the house reflected the same thing now. Not her, but Claire, still smiling, eyes black and bottomless. That night, Natalie packed her bags. She left town before sunrise. Never said goodbye. Never looked into another mirror again. But the compact mirror? It stayed behind, and it found another home. 2 years later, in a completely different town, a boy named Jacob found the little compact at a garage sale. thought it looked vintage, took it home. The next morning, his parents found the bathroom door locked, his voice calling from inside. But when they broke it down, no one was there, just a fogged-up mirror and 3 handprints on the inside. There's an old superstition that every mirror holds a copy of our soul, a reflection that's always watching, always waiting. But when you say her name 3 times, you don't summon a ghost. You invite your reflection to leave, and something else to take your place. So tonight, before you sleep, before you turn off the light, ask yourself, is your reflection still you, or is it just pretending? Thank you for listening to this chilling bedtime story. If you made it this far, you're one of the brave ones. But don't forget, some mirrors never stop watching, even after the story ends. This was Mr. DarXnights. For more terrifying tales like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And remember, never say her name, never look too long, and whatever you do, don't turn around. Sleep tight.